All. Look, once again, we're very lucky, I guess, to have Cam McGregor. Give us a bit of a chat. He's been with the club before, presented a Murray cod. But obviously, from my point of view, native fishing is, I've caught some fantastic gold, YellowBellies, and I reckon they'll pull as hard as a cod, when you first get that initial bite. So for me, it's a good learning curve. And I've got to thank Cam, actually, because his knowledge on native fishing is second to none, and along with his partner. So would you kick it off? Thanks, Cam.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, pleasure's all mine again, Calder. Thanks for having us. It's good to see some faces there spread out. Yeah, crazy times, but I got to admit, in a lot of ways, I was just there talking to Luke before. I met him at a course before. He lives up in the New England area, and the ability that we've got now for people to tune in and things, I think we've got something right out of all this mess. So yeah, pleasure's all mine. As you know, I love my trout fishing, but yeah, natives have always sort of ticked a lot of boxes for me personally, growing up and now fishing and guiding on them. So yeah, so here's just what we're going to cover tonight. Yeah, just about a little bit of a spiel about who I am for those who don't know me or who I haven't worked with in the past. I guess it's me being me, or Katie and I being Katie and I. Whenever I talk about native fish, and this doesn't matter if I'm from a guiding point of view or from a just talking to anyone, Joe Blow on the streets, I want you to leave tonight with a new appreciation of these fish, because I'm convinced that, which we'll get into later, I'm convinced that most people have got a different opinion of them than probably where they're at, if that makes sense. We're going to cover where to fish, how to fish, all the good stuff there. Flies. Now I'm going to split the talk, probably not quite in half, but going to give the main talk a run through. We're going to cover everything, and then we'll do a question session at the end of that. And if people are fly tyers or interested in how we go about constructing a fly for a fish like a yellowbelly, you're going to hear me call them yellows a lot too. That's just what's been impregnated in me since I was at a young age. But yeah, basically, those who want to stay on for the fly tying aspect of it can. Or if you want to bail, no skin off my nose whatsoever. So yeah, a little bit about me. I know we definitely bring something different to the guided fishing space, not just in Australia, I guess, but we've been told this now a bit internationally. So my background after university was basically a career in fisheries research, and that's where I was fortunate enough to meet my better half, Katie, and Katie's helped me a lot with this presentation. You'll see some data and stuff of hers later on. So she's, yeah, the good doctor of the house. She's got a PhD in fisheries research, and we met when I was doing a stint at Snobs Creek before the research component folded there, unfortunately. But so yeah, strong background in fisheries research and predominantly inland species of fish. A little bit naive, I guess, even through uni, I thought, after growing up on the Murray River at Corowa, and where we still spend a lot of time now fishing along the Murray and Mulwala and things, I thought I was going to save the Murray River. That was my goal in life. Then I started to work for fisheries, and you soon realise that we've got a bit of an issue here, but it didn't go that way. But now, I think now we're trying to make a difference where we can, and yeah, if people are leaving one of our guided trips with a greater appreciation or a talk like tonight of what's going on with our fish, then I'm a lot happier for it and feel like I'm making a difference. So yeah, you'll see a little bit of info there. We're now not going full circle. I'm actually still guiding is my predominant gig these days. That being said, Katie's a full-time researcher with Charles Sturt University and actually works with a lot of my former colleagues I was working with all the time at New South Wales Fisheries. But I am going back and doing a bit of research work on and off through the season as well. I personally can't get that out of my system. So literally within a week, we're going to be back in bushfire country looking for see how the last Macquarie perch population in the Murray catchment, in the Murray drainage, so in a stream that runs into the upper Murray, got rediscovered about 10 years ago. We were in there 2017 mapping the population, and obviously, unfortunately, got hit hard with the recent bushfires. We'll be back in there. Hopefully we can find them again is the goal. So yeah, look, a lot of my stuff, I'm probably best known for cod on fly, I guess. I still love trout fishing as much as anyone in this room, don't get me wrong, and still do a lot of it. We live where we live probably because of trout and where our target audience is a lot of the time. So yeah, this year has actually brought up 10 years for river escapes as it is now. And that's something we're very proud of. Nearly lost it in translation, but worked it out this year sort of one night. And yeah, we're pretty proud of that because it's something we've built off the ground completely into what it is now. And like to think we've done things properly, I think, as well, which is always good. If I was in the room tonight, this would have been a pop quiz question because I only think people that would have read up on Yellow's golden perch or Callop if you're from South Australia would have actually realised this. So we actually have 4 distinct populations of golden perch, with 3 of them. One's formally has been given a subspecies name, but it's highly likely, if the work was done properly, that we'd actually have our main golden perch species that we're used to seeing in the Murray-Darling Basin, and then 3 distinct subspecies. So if you actually get a photo of these fish, you can see it a bit here now. So down the bottom right there, it's actually the Lake Eyre strain of golden perch. They're a bit blunter in the head, and then the Bulu Basin fish as well, same sort of thing. They've got a bit
better.
Sorry, that's all right. Yeah, so basically what's happened is, it's anyone that's familiar with what's happened with Murray cod, Eastern cod, and Mary River cod. We've had land masses move around and things. If anything, that's probably how it happened with the Fitzroy Basin fish. Basically, it seems like they're the most, and like the distant relative of everybody. So the Great Dividing Range went up in Queensland, sent water east and west. Goldens as we know it, stayed west, and then the Fitzroy Basin fish went east, which is the same way Mary River cod and Eastern cod come about. And then we've got places like the Bulu Basin, way out west, crosses Queensland just into New South Wales. It's a terminal system. So however long ago, possibly millennia ago, got isolated from the rest of the Murray-Darling Basin. And then the Lake Eyre Basin fish, pretty incredible actually. So it's hard to believe, but when Lake Eyre fills up with water, the reason the pelicans are there, it's not only YellowBelly, but a big part of the reason is because heaps of YellowBelly and bony brim and other species of essentially desert fish end up in Lake Eyre. So I'll touch on it a bit later, but when we see big fish kills in places like the Darling River and a politician blames the drought, just remember that there's fish like YellowBelly, which also died in that fish kill, that live in these rivers. And I'm pretty sure I know which one's naturally a drier system than the Darling. So just something to keep in mind. So habitat. So what I'm talking about here is what's their habitat before we put concrete walls all over the Murray-Darling Basin. So traditionally, naturally, we've got a fish that was basically a lowland species of fish. They love a little bit warmer water. They love the turbid water. Like, you go and catch those fish out the Bulu River. Put it this way, you put that, it's darker again, more turbid again. You can really see it, the natural suspended sediment in the water than what that stream is there in the background. So that's actually the Moonee River up in southern Queensland, southwestern Queensland. So up near St. George. No, sorry, I'm just getting corrected. That's Katie. So out past Gundawindi. Now, so yeah, slow flowing rivers. Think for us in Victoria, I think somewhere like the Lower Loddon, places like that. That's where they love it. That being said, obviously they range in good years. They'll range a fair way up into the hills. Like we still see Goldens in the Upper Murray. Admittedly now, it's because they're actually fish that run up out of Lake Hume that have been stocked in Lake Hume. And obviously the Murray had yellows pretty much as soon as the water started to slow a little bit in velocity, naturally coming down out of the hills. Goldens used to really dominate our river systems. Now, they do. I'll touch on it a bit later. They like to hang around timber and rocks and things, like a cod in a lot of ways. Just remember they're a schooling fish. Where you find one, you're going to find more. And I'll touch on it a bit more later, but they'd like it a little bit differently to a cod. Now, highly migratory. So we're used to seeing fish like trout and salmon around the world, salmonid species of fish. We see it here in Australia when we get fish run up out of lakes doing these essentially famous runs. Like, you know, we've all seen the photo of the salmon jumping into the bear's mouth and places like Alaska, all through North America. Now, what we miss in Australia is naturally we tend not to have too many clearer systems. So we can't see these big runs of fish. If we have one fish that can compete with salmonids in North America, it's a golden perch. So they're highly migratory fish. Just because you caught them somewhere the day before, this is even in a lake environment, just because you caught them somewhere the day before does not mean they're going to be there. They swim and move around a lot. Now, basically this stat here, highly migratory, more than 2,000 river kilometres. A fish got tagged down at Loxton in South Australia and then was turned up some months later at Mungandai. So it wasn't even in the Darling River anymore. It was actually in so basically the way that the rivers run up there, where I'll be honest, we do some weird things naming rivers in Australia, but the McIntyre comes down, it forms that start of the water border between Queensland and New South Wales. Then it turns into the Barwon River. And then when the Bogan joins the Barwon River, it becomes the Darling. So that fish has swum a fair section of the Murray River, turned left and gone up the Darling River. And by the time it's got up to Mungandai, it's in quite small water. Pretty much where Mungandai, in a lot of ways, would look like the Campaspe as far as flows and things. Now, just a little bit about their biology. So they're pretty long-lived fish, been aged up to 26 years. And there's a fish that's has been recorded bigger than this 760 mil. It was a fish that was labelled as a Murray perch out of Cow Swamp. But most people are convinced that commercial fisherman just had actually caught a Murray cod and it just got mislabeled when it went to market. But personally, I know of a 77 centimetre golden that got caught out of Lake Hume. That was some 10 years ago. So bigger again than this fish, but that's kind of what we expect in a lake environment. Basically, we create these environments for fish to grow big and fat in a lot of the time. Growth rates dependent on foodability. Keep in mind it'll make sense later on, keep in mind these golden perch growth rates. This is really important on a slide later on when I'm talking about emerging fisheries in Victoria and anywhere for that matter. So they grow quite quickly that first couple of years. And then they get around that 50 centimetre mark and they slow right down. That's kind of what we're seeing. Now, yeah, maturity, all the good stuff there. Keep in mind too, that 23 degrees, that's a bit of they like warm water. We'll get into that later on. Now, as far as the way these fish breed, they do it. So Murray cod are a nesting species of fish. This is where goldens are different, and this is why they're basically, we've done a number on them in so many ways when we've regulated rivers, especially the further south in their range. Now, they lay their eggs. Their eggs are essentially, they float. So I've personally seen golden spawning a couple of times, and not to mention fish that have been artificially spawned. They're actually quite an easy fish to spawn in captivity. Hence why they get thrown around a lot from a stocking point of view. So what makes them very different? Silver perch has got the same egg phase, I guess. Trying to look for a better word there. Similar life history. So the key thing that's different with a lot of our other fish, golden's eggs are semi-buoyant. So this is why they want to run big distances upstream. They want to go up places like the Darling River. They want to go to Menindee when it's not being hammered. They want to swim, like right now, there's people lined up below the Hume Dam, that big terminal piece of concrete on the Murray River at Albury, and they're catching YellowBelly. The reason they're catching those YellowBelly is those poor fish want to keep swimming upstream to spawn. It could probably come December. They can't do it at the moment. So in a good world, they'd run up there, they spawn, and eggs get fertilized, and then they're floating downstream. So the whole idea is that when the river's current is going to then disperse their offspring downstream. Now, I touched on it then. So we had strong, healthy populations of fish all the way up into our upper reaches of river. The reason they're not there anymore is because we've put dirty big lumps of concrete in the form of dams everywhere. Now, don't get me wrong, we do need water infrastructure, but something like over 2,000 barriers to fish migration in the Murray-Darling Basin, you can kind of see why our fish numbers are declining a lot. Now, if you'll see a stat there, actually, that name Baumgartner, that's who Katie works with now, Lee. He's shown that even fish, like the larvae of goldens going through an undershot weir. So that's basically, an undershot weir is where the water's released down lower off gates. Very common design along the Murray and Murrumbidgee rivers. It's going to kill up to 90% of larvae passing through there. Not to mention things like, Katie's doing a lot of, if people have seen it, the fish on the pump screens and things. She's been working hard on that. We've done all these things to basically make it pretty hard for the poor fish. Now, what is counteracting a lot of this? And in a lot of ways, we still have relatively healthy fisheries for golden perch, especially in our impoundments. I'll say we have outstanding fisheries, especially in spring, is that these fish are relatively easy to breed in captivity. So in a lot of ways, we're counteracting basically what we've done to these fish in the natural environment with hatchery fish. So we have other issues then, possibly things like genetic diversity and that being lost. Okay, this is some work that I often talk about, often think about, and I thought I've got the platform to talk about it tonight. So basically, when I was at Narrandera, this feeds into this whole situation where these fish are pretty much adapted to live in a desert. So when we get big kills out on the Darling and things, it should raise alarm bells for people when politicians turn around and just say it's purely drought. So this is the Warrego River, one of the main feed streams for the Darling. So basically, the background of this work was I was actually up there looking for carp larvae, and we had a project called Hotspots of Carp Recruitment. So we were going through with larval drift nets, working out where carp were spawning, and then we could come back and hopefully implement management tools into that. Basically, we already knew that wetland areas were where these carp were going to spawn within each river system. So we waited for floods, and we got to go up got to go up to the Warrego, and we ended up spending 3 months there because this is during the drought. If anyone remembers how bad 2007 was, just to give you an idea this is just to show you how productive our rivers can be. So if you look on that map, nearly up the top, there's Charleville. We first picked up golden perch larvae on the first spawning up there. 3 months later, by the time we got down to where the Darling, so this is how slow these floodwaters move. By the time we got down to where it met the Darling River, we were recording goldens off the first spawning that were already 60 mil long, which is extremely quick growth rates. And we had successive spawning events as well. So this is just to paint another picture. To this day, the Warrego River has next to no irrigation on it, a little bit around Cunnamulla. So I just wanted to show you how productive our river systems can be relatively naturally. So diet, this is from Katie's PhD. Now this is starting to feed into the nitty gritty about what sort of flies and what we want to imitate for when we're fishing for goldens. So they have a diet primarily based on two things: crustaceans, be it shrimps and yabbies, and bait fish. Things like, well, Katie's PhD was about seeing if we could control carp numbers by stocking fish like cod and yellowbelly. So that's why all this work happened. Now, what Katie showed, and I think this is really important to think of, and to this day, I think about it a lot personally with my own fishing. So what Katie showed was that, that she apologized that she had to call shrimp prawns. It was because it went to an international audience, and international actually call macrobrachian prawns, the big shrimp there. So basically what she showed was that she had all these different prey items stocked in tanks at different densities during the tank trials. Whenever she increased the density of one of them, either small fish, ignore rainbow fish, I'll digress here, anyone who fishes the Broken River, don't worry about imitating rainbow fish. There's heaps of rainbow fish in the Goulburn and the Broken still. For some reason, Goldens don't seem to like to eat them, which is pretty interesting. So basically, if you see here, whenever she increased the abundance of one thing over the others, that then become the preferred prey source for the fish. You could even take a trouty mind to this and think of when you've got a huge hatch of mayflies or caddis happening, and we think that the fish have become selective. Have they become selective, or are they just taking advantage of the dominant food source at the time, which is what I've always thought. So, yeah, quite interesting work. And all these prey items here, and you should be thinking, like, we've got little carp and stuffers there as well, but yeah, whenever one increased, that become the dominant food source. When she had relatively even numbers of the prey items, those fish fed on the prey items more willy-nilly, I guess. Right, enough fish nerdy talk. We'll get where to fish. So yeah, I focused on our fishery here down in Victoria. Obviously, there's sensational lakes in New South Wales. I'm going to touch on a little bit Windermere later. It is the pinnacle of golden perch fishing in this country, don't get me wrong, but we still have some awesome options around here and in Victoria. So we've already got really well-established fisheries. Now, keeping in mind too, I'll tell you straight up that our fishery down south and in every lake I'm going to talk about is 100% based on stock fish. So it wouldn't be happening without stock fish. So if it wasn't for that, these fisheries wouldn't exist. So Eildon, I'd say 10 years ago, Eildon was probably, not a little bit longer ago, kind of like 08, 09, probably 09 into 10. I'd say Eildon was up there with the best golden perch fishery in the country. It was when I actually lived down there. It was incredible. But yeah, I think by the looks of it now, it's coming back into gear at the moment as well. Hume's always been a good one. Nillacoody, Epiloc's on the way back as well. And keep in mind too that we've just come out of another bad drought period, and I'd actually say that, at least down here, we've come out of this drought pretty good as far as water levels and things. I know, don't get me wrong, New South Wales, Queensland's been real crook. And I'm not never going to hide from the fact there. But I think, yeah, as Victorians, we've come out of it pretty well, and we've still got baseline numbers of fish in our lakes moving forward. Now, lakes are definitely a lot of lakes are going to fill this year with what's going on at the moment. Currang Lakes. There's heaps of other smaller ones. By all means, jump on the Vic Fish Stock database, and you're going to see if your little water body's been stocked. And there's some little sleeper lakes. Don't get me wrong. There's lakes that have been getting stocked for 15 years, and no one's really ever given them credit. And at the moment, there's only little kids fishing them on their push bikes, probably trying to keep it quiet. But some of them have got amazing weed beds and are quite clear and aren't too deep as well. Now, right now is peak YellowBelly time. So spring is traditionally the best time to catch a golden, and it just is, to be honest. It's the big reason is there's a few things going on, but basically goldens are trying to typically get ready to spawn by December. They still go through the motions in lakes. I'll touch on that in a bit. But basically two things going. That fish's metabolism starting to go through the roof. They want to eat. So they're ready come spawning time. And that coincides with lake levels hopefully increasing, combined with water temperature increasing, and the whole food chain's just booming to life. So basically that 15, 16 degrees I state there, that's for me when I've over the years in lakes started to get a little bit of action from yellows. By 18, it's normally game on. Like, we'll drive around the lake and look for at least 18-degree water often in early spring, and sometimes you don't find it. There's a few little things you can do, which I'll touch on, which you might be able to increase your chances of finding that slightly warmer water, but keep that in mind. So yeah, early spring, those fish are still going to be a little bit deeper out off the edges. Things like 5, 6, 7 meters of water, they're often still holding out there, just waiting for that water to warm. So what I'm going to talk about now, obviously I spend a lot of time in a boat, but there's no reason why you can't get a little bit crafty with your footwork and put yourself in positions where you can access that little deeper water if you need to off the bank. Now, and these are for deeper storages as well. We've got a lot of shallower ones, so that's not going to be as big a deal there. So, and feeding off that too, weed beds are always productive locations. So if you can see a visible weed bed, or you can pick it up on your sounder if you're out in the boat and it's within striking distance, just keep that in mind. Basically, weed beds are fish factories. And personally I find when lake levels have remained stable, so I'm talking about bigger irrigation lakes, when lake levels have remained relatively stable over an extended period of time, that's when goldens are more likely to be established on weed beds because the whole food population's there. Right now, a lot of our bigger lakes are filling up quite quickly. Weed beds aren't really going to come into play. We're actually got a real issue at the moment with all the wattle regrowth and things are starting to get submerged on bigger lakes. I got snagged heaps the other day on Hume on submerged wattle trees. Now, by and large, come mid to late December, it all depends on what's happened water temperature wise. If you've had it for extended for mid 20 degree levels, your activity is going to drop off a little bit. Those fish basically become almost like they go through the motions of spawning still in the lakes, and they'll go and hold out a bit deeper, so they can be a little bit harder to find. Now, I'm going to say straight up that if you want to spend time on these fish, spring is the time to do it. And I know as a Victorian angler that it's a bit hard when you've got the best trout fishing in mainland Australia down here at your disposal. But if you really want to get stuck into these fish, I urge anyone to get out there in spring and give it a red hot crack. Especially when you first start to get your first, you get a few warm days in a row by late September into October, it's time to start looking for them. And likewise, they should still be quite active early December. And I know it's hard because we're chasing them. We're starting to chase those beautiful cod by then as well. Okay, I'm going to admit this fish here was not caught on a fly. The reason it is there is to show you the potential of what golden perch can do in lakes in Victoria. That fish was 67 centimetres. It's still the biggest fish I've personally caught, and that was out at Eildon. So that was in those glory years. So we have the potential to grow some seriously big fish down here, Hume as well. And it's basically when a fish can get to the point where it can really start to predate on small redfin, that's when I think that they really start to excel. So now, come summer, autumn, and into winter, if anyone's spent any time watching what lure anglers do, and I urge anyone to do it, because at the end of the day, you can really replicate a lot of the time what lure anglers are doing with fly, and we can actually do things a little bit better in a lot of ways as well. I spruik the same stuff when I'm talking cod, and what I'm getting at here is if you've got access to a boat and you're on one of these bigger lakes, these fish basically, once the edges warm right up, or vice versa, it's just too cold, and they go out and they'll often sit just above the thermocline. If people are aware what the thermocline is, you'll mark it on your sounder. It's basically a measure of two different densities of water, and the fish will often sit on it, and you can get fish way out wide. So that fish there in that photo that was caught close to the edge in a few meters of water, come later on in the season, can be out on these trees way out in the background there. You might be in, I've seen them in, you might be in 20 meters of water, but the thermocline's at 10 and they're sitting at 8. Now, anyone that's spent time lake fishing for trout, you've probably already got the gear in a lot of situations to chase these fish, and that is your sinking lines. And we can get super accurate with a sinking line. If we know a sinking line sinks at 7 inches per second, you can count that fly down and you can have your fly right in the zone. So just keep that in mind. I will admit sometimes it's not the funnest fishing. You're not sneaking around the edges and things, but it can be done. Now, come autumn, I've seen it a few times now, especially on prominent points and things. I've got some photos of that later on that I got at Hume the other day, just to point out some locations to target. Prominent points, not just for yellers, like points in any lake should be well known to anyone that fishes them, either bank or boat base. Basically, lakes are a dynamic environment, and lakes have current, and it's something that people don't seem to acknowledge. But if you go and stand on a point, you can see it a lot of the time, that if you've had a bit of a blowy wind, or even just on a calm day, a nice wind lane, slick or something might form off the end. And if you've already got that mindset of where you can find a trout in a lake, those places are a convergence of currents. And just like for the trout angler, they should be fished quite hard by someone looking for a fish like a YellowBelly as well. Now, I touched on it before when we'll tear around a lake looking for that first lot of warm water in spring. Steep rock wall banks are often the first place to fire in a lake for a fish like YellowBelly. It's amazing how many times that you can go to these places and that bank might plummet down into 8 meters of water, but those fish are up suspended a bit higher. Your main lake might only be 14, 15 degrees, but especially if it's a northerly aspect rock face, basically those rocks are warming and they're not cooling down properly over night time. So that water can be 2, even 3 degrees warmer immediately adjacent to those really extensive rock wall banks. So just keep that in mind. That's stupid pun. That's gold if you find it. So lake features to be on the lookout for. Yeah, I took these from the boat the other day at Hume, but you think about it. If you're on the bank over there on the right-hand side, there's no reason why you couldn't fish any of these edges on foot. I'm going to get into a little bit later, but Goldens can offer up some really good sight fishing opportunities as well if you get the right weather. Now, you should always be taking note of the bank that you're on as to the gradient of that bank. Now, even just, I think it was last week, out here in the main body of the lake was 20 degrees from memory. Yeah, in on this edge, inside where we had cooling flow of water, I was getting up to 22 degrees. And surprise, surprise, this is where I found fish along this bank in that slightly warmer water consistently. Now, here you look at this bank, nice prominent point. It's got a few things that fish like to hold off. We could have, during the day, early and late, I'd expect fish in quite close here on the edges in that slightly warmer water. Then as that sun gets high, I expect fish to suck out and they'll be around this tree out here. I don't anticipate they're going to go too deep. Now, the other thing we had going for us here is we had bait fish holding. I'd say by the amount of smallish redfin I got as bycatch that there was smaller ones again there holding fish there. Now, I talked about prominent points. This is a cool one. I've seen this a few times in lakes in Victoria, especially. Y-Angler, for any people in New South Wales, is another one. Copeton, for that matter, as well. Admittedly, not the big granity rocks that you get in a place like Copeton. So where I am, it's hard to believe, but where I am, where the boat's positioned, not so much where the boat's positioned where I took the photo from, where my cursor is here on the far right-hand side of the screen, was only 4 meters of water there. What was actually happening here is we had this rock ridge line, essentially like an old fault line, running out into the water, and it was a real mixing pot of current water and held fish there. And two reasons I feel: we had nice current flow, plus we had warmer water coming in off that rocky bank being made. Now, that's that point up there in the top right I was just talking about. Now, anyone who's spent time fishing for trout on lakes, if you've walked away from water like this, give yourself a tap on the back of the head, because when this happened after 5 minutes of windy weather, I lost a fish just here as soon as it calmed down. Can everyone see that dirty plume of water left on the bank there? Yet the water's quite calm. This is a gun feature to look for in a lake, especially in spring when you expect the fish to be on the edges, or maybe again in autumn. Now, it's the same thing. We talk about yabby feeders and things for trout in lakes. Surprise, surprise. Where is it? Here's a yabby pattern for a golden that I'll tie up. Same situation. Not only are yabbies and things getting ploughed by these big pounding waves for a little bit, you've also got bait fish and things becoming disorientated. And these, for a short time, while this water's settling down, you expect to see fish patrolling the edges and in and out of this dirty water. Yeah, same. Another bank here. This one I took a photo of just to show how calm the water is here on the edge. I think it's the fish in the opening photo come off this edge here late in the day. Basically, just, got a bit of structure. It's a prominent point out where the boat is. So think points, access to shallow water as well, especially when lakes are rising. You'll see, amazingly, we've got all these green hillsides that are going on at the moment. And as lakes rise, just like trout and things mooching into shallows, fish are going to suck on and off these points, off their holding timber, come in, feed shallow. And as long as they've got nice access to a little bit deeper water as well. Now, that was a very spring focused thing. A lot of that other fishing for fishing lakes through the season is going to be out on trees and things. Now, where to fish in rivers? So keep in mind these fish are meant to be in a river, so they know what they're doing there. Now, purely rivers I've called the Murray a Victorian river. I guess it's our border with our friendly neighbour to the north at the moment, New South Wales. So it's one of our most famous, or it's probably our most famous river for a reason, and our fishing as well. But Victoria, rivers like the Goulburn, the Broken, I've singled out the lower ovens there. Now, fisheries are trying to change this. They've pumped a heap of fish into the Ovens River. By fish, I mean Goldens, to see what they do. My personal gut feeling is that they're going to move down where the water's warmer for longer. So that lower oven section's a good producer of yellows. The Loddon, the Avoca, the Campaspe, the Wannon. Now, that Wannon's actually a Glen Elg Hopkins feeder, and they're translocated over there from illegal stockings, but there's a reasonably good population over that way. Like I said, all our rivers in Victoria are reliant on stocking. I don't know if anyone remembers, but a couple of years ago, researchers got extremely excited that off the back of environmental water that they recorded golden perch larvae for the first time in Victoria in the Goulburn, and that was in the lower Goulburn down around Shepparton. We don't know if those fish recruited or not though. So the fish bred, but we're not sure if the little ones survived. So just like, I suppose from a native point of view, the beauty of yellows is that when we're not completely obsessed by trying to catch a cod on fly, we've got this other species of fish. So just like the lakes, spring's the best time to chase them in rivers as well. Now, that works out pretty good because you can size, don't get me wrong, you're still going to get bycatch and things, and I urge anyone not to fish places where they think that they're going to get in, like going to encounter cod regularly that may be nesting. But yeah, downgrade your tackle, which we're going to get into soon, and fish for goldens on rivers. You can definitely target a little bit of water too. Avoid big, heavy structure where cod might be nesting. Now, I honestly feel if we targeted goldens with lighter tackle, like we will happily do in spring in lakes to present smaller offerings better, we'd see them more regularly in our rivers. The issue you run there, obviously, during the season is that you get dusted by a cod. So, just like cod, they'll hold on structure, but the common thing that I often see is that goldens are often on spindlier, basically smaller branches. Now, if you've got rivers that, and this probably feeds into the whole thing that they love to eat crustaceans, if you've got rivers where you get reed banks, and if you've got a combination of reed banks combined with a little bit of flow and a little bit of structure, they're really good places to catch a yellow for sure. Now, they're not a fish, I guess none of our native fish really are, but yellows will definitely, they love that backwater flow, probably even a little bit less flow than cod when they can get it. Now, just like fish, the fish in the lakes, and if anything, this is more pronounced in the river fish. I'm not sure if, I don't know, senses are a little bit heightened or something. It's probably a stupid analogy, or we're probably the reason is that we're often on some of our favourite cod rivers in autumn. We do, every year we'll get a couple of weeks there where not only are the cod really fired up, but you'll have 30 and 40 centimetre yellows will happily come out and nail a cod fly even when it's fished on 40-pound tippet. And it's I think the crux of it is those fish are getting ready for winter and they'll have a crack at most things. Now, that there is very evident in rivers like the Murray and the Goulburn as well. Basically, if you can do it, like we all know and love the Goulburn as Victorian trout anglers, and we kind of are conditioned to the way it flows. And let's face it, people flock to it when it gets turned off for the end of irrigation season. Just remember that is also a gun time to be lower down on that river looking for a native fish. Okay, so I wanted to, Chris was keen to hear a bit about it, and I guess, and this is specifically for the Calder members, well, Victorians, if anything. Now, so big fisheries are starting to stock more and more waterways with native fish. This is back at the moment, most of the fingerlings actually come out of New South Wales, but there's going to be a huge hatchery. It's already been started to be built up at Shepparton, and this is the reason. Basically, they're going to ramp up their native fish stocking even more. So, of particular interest to Calder, places like Lauriston, Malmesbury, Harcourt, Barker's Creek, and yeah, up at Colburn. So the Colburn system is starting to receive goldens. Now, it's probably a little bit early at this stage to see realistically how they're going, but I'd say give that full 2 to 3 year mark, you should start to see fish pushing through. If they're doing well, they should be getting around that 30 centimetre mark at that year 3 to 4. So like I touched on before, they're quite quick growing fish initially, and then they slow down as they get older. So by all means, I'll be out there looking for them. Now, of interest to me was, so Windermere's the golden egg, I guess, of all YellowBelly fisheries in the country. It's famous for a reason. It does very well. And so Windermere, interestingly, has had comparable for its size, and admittedly it's been fairly low for a fair while now, and it tends to get run low as well. So I think at the moment it's around, I don't know, 30 or something. I haven't been up there this year, but so yeah, 39,000 fish in a lake the size of Windermere, and we're getting similar numbers pumped into these small lakes. So what I'm hoping is, so we haven't, Windermere doesn't have redfin to predate on fingerlings, which is a big deal. Redfin are just out and out murderers when it comes to small fish stockings. If anyone's involved in these fish stockings, I urge you to be able to get out there and spread the fingerlings out into cover straight away. We've got really good results up here now in lakes that we're doing that in, with cod especially. And I know cod are getting put in these lakes as well. So it's basically, it's at the stage at the moment with these lakes, we just got to sit back a little bit and see how they go. But I think they'll do really well. And I think, too, we have the ability to have mixed fisheries in Victoria. So I wouldn't stress too much about them eating all your trout and things like that, because remember that trout in Victoria are already getting stocked as yearlings a lot of the time as well. So they're beating a lot of that early predation. Now, Rocklands has also had heaps of fish pumped into it. So it's going to be, interesting, because it's a fishery where these fish aren't native to, but it's going to, just the sheer amount of fish that have been pumped into it, it's going to be a big producer of native fish. More fish are getting put into it than yielding. Righto, so flies. So as we've touched on, we know that their diet is largely based on crustaceans and small fish. So shrimp and yabby patterns are a natural place to start with these fish. Streamers to represent your bait fish, and in sizes to match what's around. A flat-headed gudgeon is a really good starting point. Anyone Google what a flathead, there's some in pictures before. Basically they're from one end of the basin to the other, at least in the impoundment side of things. Now, I personally love natural materials in my flies. I tie with a lot of synthetics, but I'm all about that kick, that subtle kick and pulse that you get from a natural material, something like marabou or rabbit's fur. Now, the retrieves, pinching ideas from the lure scene, it's pretty crazy what guys have now is established as a retrieve to catch a golden. Often a lot of rod tip shaking and things, and we can imitate a fair bit of that with our flies, just little bumps, small strips, very small strips and things. But keep in mind that by and large, they don't like their prey moving too quickly, and they love to saunter up behind something, sneak up to it, and basically suck it in quite quickly at the last second. So the longer you can have your presentation in front of a fish, the more chance you've got of it getting eaten. But at the same time, don't fish it completely static, add a bit of movement to it. Probably the one thing that's hard to really show on a Zoom presentation. Now, one of my shrimp patterns on the left I come up with a while ago. Subbed out, and never used to have the synthetic wing on it. It does now, just a little bit of profile, but that's on a size 1 hook. That's an Arex hook pattern. These are the two flies we're going to go through in the fly tying later for those that stay on. So a fair bit of weight in the front there. It's like a 4 gram size dumbbell eyes. So depending on who you are, I fish them on a 6 weight, but you can you may want to use an 8 on those. Now, this fly here I've tied, funnily, belly buster minnow. It's kind of a hybrid. Anyone who's familiar with an Avalon fly in the salt, quite a famous flats fly, I pinched the idea off that. Basically, it's got tungsten beads on a mono keel, tungsten or brass. So we get a fly that it fishes a lot more straight in the water, as opposed to a shrimp that's going to go up and down. This guy fishes more straight. And I think just does a little bit better job sometimes imitating a bait fish. And it's fairly snag resistant too with that construction. So yeah, rod 6 to 8 weight. Now, your floating lines are going to handle a lot of work still for yellowbelly fishing, especially in water down to about 2.5 meters deep. We can actually really exaggerate that crustacean-like retrieve with a floating line, because our line's constantly wanting to pull our fly up off the bottom, and then so we can get almost like a real vertical lift. So keep that in mind too, that you can, in a lot of situations, especially in those shallower water depths, a floating line is a really good option. Now, if you want to get down, fish that deeper water with off the bank, I'd urge people to use a sink tip line. The reason is that, yeah, don't get me wrong, you can use things like stripping baskets and things that can help you out, but with a sink tip line, you're going to get that exaggerated lift as well on the fly. Plus, a floating running line is a lot easier to handle. Now, we could talk all night about densities and things, but all like airflow, scientific angler, all the good manufacturers have got sink tip lines in a lot of varying sink rates. I'm happy to talk more at length about that as well. Now, for the floating lines, I really like a saltwater style leader construction, something down to about 15, even 20 pound on the tip, and then I can muck around with my tippet size. So straight away, we're fishing a lot less breaking strain than a fish and rod weights than something like a cod as well. So for a day where we still might be casting a lot, it's a lot, depending on who you are, it can be a lot less tiring as well, more pleasant. Now, on our sinking lines, I'll go digress a little bit back to sinking lines out in the boat. Sometimes I'll happily fish a full sink line as well, just purely if I really need to get down to where I think the fish are. So I'm basically got lines all the way down to sink sevens and things like those crazy fast ones. Now, yeah, so a lot shorter for your two-piece leaders for those sink tip and sinking lines. Basically half 30 or 40 pound butt, and then 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon. You can go lighter. Personally, I've never really felt a need to go underneath 12. I know some people will go lighter again. Look, by all means, if you think it can make a difference, go for it. Maybe clearer waters, like Windermere, like when I used to go out there a bit when I was younger, we did used to go quite light there sometimes. That's about it for that side of things. I just want to give a little bit of plug for what we get up to here. So for those that don't know, we're based not far from Myrtleford. We service an area of southern New South Wales and Victoria, and basically our business is half native fishing, admittedly mostly cod fishing. This springtime, especially yellow stuff, something I always relish and get to guide a few people on it typically each year. And obviously we've got this amazing trout area around here, and super reliable as far as stream flows. We've just come out of what was regarded as a bad drought, and I can count on one hand how many streams I think we may have lost fish in. And we've just come out of some pretty horrific bushfires in a lot of areas too, and we've actually come out of them really good. I'm actually pretty happy. If you can be happy with a fire event, but from what we've lost from an aquatic point of view, we've done all right. Like, we've had big kills. Anyone who wants to read up on that, we did a pretty extensive write-up in Flystream there a while back. So really good cod options not far from here, and we spend a lot of time up around Cairn Cove, and I'm actually loading up tomorrow and heading up that way for a couple of days, drifting the Swampy up there tomorrow, and got trout and Murray cod options up that way. Walk and wade, boat base. We basically got everything covered, I think, and the reason we're in this area is it's sheer diversity, and probably more importantly, it's where I grew up and fished as a kid and know it like the back of my hand. And I feel pretty fortunate to be able to show people things like that. So, any questions on that stuff before we show off these two fly patterns?
What would you target from the bank? So if you're fishing from the bank for yellows,
yep.
You say lake like Epilop and Kencurran, what would be your go-to spot first, you reckon? I know the water's rising pretty fast in Kencurran right now.
Yeah.
So what would be your go-to type of area?
It is a bit harder at Kencurran because it doesn't really, in a lot, like somewhere like even like Epiloc, show off those real prominent points a lot of the time. But just because it's a shallower basin. But where you've got a little bit of point where, like, coming out into the water, I'd often start there. And then where you can, like, I know that top end is quite shallow and flat, but even try and pick out some of the old creek courses and things as well. Just a little bit extra depth. So basically, if you've got that slightly deeper water not far from the shallows, I'll be looking at that. That being said, like you pointed out, it's coming up quick like a lot of our lakes. So a real random one I've found over the years is old fence lines, for some reason, have the ability to hold yellows. And they can be in quite shallow water a lot of the time as well. And I don't know what it is, if it just gives them that little bit of cover that they can launch their raids into shallow water and things. So any of the old fence lines and things as well, definitely worth a look. A while ago now, we cleaned up on an old fence line up the Delatide Arm in Eildon, and it was only in about 2 meters of water. So
what about times a day?
early and late's always good. Like, it's very much like cod in a lot of ways. Early and late's always good. I tend to find that once that sun gets real high, those fish tend to suck out a little bit deeper. Which makes, like, sight fishing is a serious where the water's clear enough, it's a serious viable option for yellows. I generally find best sight fishing though when lakes have been stable and we've got weed beds in quite close, and the fish will patrol the weed edge lines. But yeah, early and late. But if you can get access to standing timber during the middle of the day, I'd definitely spend some time there as well.
Cool.
What would be your strategy like on those rock walls? Would you sort of anchor up or use a spot lock and just hammer the edge, or would you drift along, or would you slowly, push along?
Yeah, hold out off the edge, depending on how good of a cast you are, but probably you don't have to be casting a full line. But if you can accurate, to be honest, don't even have to be that accurate, but if you can throw 40, 50 feet consistently, put yourself out that cast distance out off the bank, and even on those rock walls, and even shallow edges, throw right in onto the edge and basically hop your presentation out. So if you're fishing a steeper edge, that's when you might want a faster sinking line, purely so once you're getting a couple of strips out off the edge, then you're fishing that gradient as it comes down better. Vice versa, if you're fishing into a shallower edge, you might want a floater or something like an intermediate where you can work that depth range a lot better. So basically, often when you're sight fishing a golden, it typically looks like that. That's the head end, and a lot of the time they're mooching along the bottom like that. The one situation I've seen differently is when they're holding on trees or they're actively working bait schools, and then you'll see them more of a classic fish in the water, like more alert, looking to feed on bait and things.
Cam, you were talking.
Will they chase the fly?
Yeah, they will, definitely. Yeah, and they're shockers for following you all the way to the boat. But I don't know what it is. You tend not to see them until it's too late with them. They almost hang back a little bit. But they will chase a fly. Sometimes just little changes, similar to cod in a lot of ways, little changes on the retrieve can get them to elicit a response. But by and large, if you turn the speed on too quick for them, they'll veer off it.
Sweet. Cam, you were talking about sort of local temperature variations being an indication of good fishing. Are you actively monitoring that when you're fishing, or are you using time of day and sort of depth as analogues for that?
Hello, Sean. There's a friendly voice from New South or Canberra. If I'm out in the boat, I am constantly looking. I'll actually look at temperature a lot of the time more than I do what the sounder readout is. It sounds crazy, but at least initially in the day, I'll try and find slightly warmer water. I'd say if you're bank based, it'd definitely it'd definitely be handy to carry a thermometer, at least in the earlier stages of spring. So, a really graphic example is when I lived down at Lake Eildon. So initially, the Delatide area is regarded as the best area for yellowbelly fishing. The reason being is it's a lot shallower section and it warms up a lot quicker. But basically, it started to fire that year, late September, fished really well up until mid to late November. And then once we got into December, way down the other end of the main basin of the lake, like Eildon itself, it started to warm up. It's a lot deeper water. And then we started to see the fish there really fire up. So, yeah, I think probably more than any freshwater species of fish I've ever chased, I'd say water temperature is extremely important with yellowbelly.
Sweet. Just what I was after. Thanks, mate.
G'day, Cam. I wanted to ask about, so say you were gonna hit a like Epiloc, not having fished it before, and I'm gonna fish it land based. Would your determination about where to start on the day be like? Are you looking at sort of like wind direction? Like, I get that the points are important, but is it the points on like the more windblown side of the lake are going to be the best, or the points on the more sheltered side of the lake are going to be the best, or is it just purely to do with depth and temperature basically?
Yeah, no, good point. And it is something I probably overlooked a little bit in the talk. I like a little bit of movement, especially if I'm searching. Like by movement, I mean wind chop. And I like the sheer uncomfortable wind in your face banks. I wouldn't necessarily go there for a golden. I actually find that they might stay away from that. But if you can find a little bit of stirred up water, and with a little bit of onshore wind in your face, I'd definitely go there over the static, calm bank. I think, yeah, just a little bit of, it's everything. It's not just cover for us trying to catch the fish. It's putting a little bit more oxygen in the water. The fish tend to be a little bit more active in those spots, I find. You don't get those, if there's algae about, you don't have a real build up of algae. But knowing you, Pete, reading between the lines, I think you're already thinking the right way. Yeah.
Can Coburn, Cam. Just curious. I know they stocked it. Was it a couple of years ago they started stocking that now? I don't know how long they've been stocking it for, but how have they fished? I know the trout's been up and down there. Sometimes it can be really good. Sometimes it can be off. But how's the cod taken to Can Coburn Lake?
I haven't heard of one getting caught there yet, to be honest.
You haven't? Sorry.
Yeah, I haven't heard of a cod come out of it yet off the stockings that they did there. I could be very wrong. But yeah, I haven't actually heard of any coming out of it yet. Interestingly, they've been pumping. So New South Wales are starting to follow the Vic model of stocking yearling trout. They've been tagging these yearling rainbows with a beautiful bright yellow tag, which is really easy to notice when you catch one of them in the swampy downstream of the pondage. I think we're up to, with clients, I think I'm up to 6 or 7 now from the last 3 years. So a lot of the rainbows that they've put in the pondage are actually in the river down below now. So it actually got, when was it, last week or the week before I was up there, they actually put a lot of Atlantic salmon in it as well, which is just something they do from time to time when they've got extras out of Gaydon. So,
okay.
But yeah, I haven't heard any yet about the cod. So who knows? They might just turn up in the next couple of years too, like sometimes they do. So it'll be interesting. But I actually think that from what I'm seeing at the moment up there, I think the pondage is on the way back pretty well for the next bit with trout. There's some really nice fish coming out of the pondage. Yeah.
I've never really fished the lake other than on one of the banks with my brother in that a few years ago. But I haven't got a boat to fish it, but I'm keen to at least get a tube and get a little bit out and kick out that way. But there's not much insect life there, is there? Like in the lake, is there?
No, it's very, very up and down with hydro generation. That being said, it's probably my favourite lake to fish, at least up this way from the boat. Purely because that high or low, you can really target the channels and depressions and things in there, and you get your head around it a little bit. It's really well defined where fish hold in it, and it's from a lock style fishing point of view.
Yep.
It's a really good lake for that.
Cool. All right. Cheers, man.
What's the future for YellowBelly? Like, is stocking the way to go, or are you better off preserving the gene pool in each river? Like in Europe, for example, now, like where I'm from back in Ireland, we won't stock the rivers because we want to keep that gene pool of brown trout. We don't want to mix them with rainbow or any other breed of trout coming in there.
Yeah, and totally get that. Unfortunately, what's happened with Goldens now, it's at the point where I actually think that if we've done that damage, it can be argued two ways, that these fish were so highly mobile that they had a gene pool that was the same across the Murray-Darling Basin. But it's also highly likely that that's not true, that we had localized strains of Golden. We made, like the Warrego that I talked about, for example, is probably isolated to fish that even used to go up and down the Darling, because the Warrego doesn't reach the Darling every year, things like that. But basically where it's at now is, and work that Katie's been a part of as well. I'm happy for her to chime in here, but so she did, basically they've looked at if people are familiar with what an otolith is, it's the ear bone of a fish, and we can dissect the ear bone and count the growth rings on it and work out how old a fish is by its otolith. We now have this amazing ability to use microchemistry techniques, and basically we can work out from the signature, the strontium stable isotope signature. That was my brain trust in the background. Each river has a unique signature, or even sections of river. We can then go back and work out where that fish, this isn't just YellowBelly, we even do it on carp. We can work out where that fish was born by its strontium isotope within the otolith. What is it, 80% or something? Okay, so every golden perch in Victoria has a strontium isotope for the Murrumbidgee River. The reason is because the hatcheries where all the goldens are produced is on the Murrumbidgee River. So we're already at a point where if it wasn't for hatcheries, we would have lost these fish in Victoria. What's the Bidgee at? Yes. But even then, so the last real stronghold, it looks like, of golden perch spawning we had left in the Murray-Darling Basin, it'll still do it. It's not like rivers like the Paru and the Warrego and stuff, they get stocked, but they're doing their own thing up there. But the Menindee Lake system, admittedly, it's a man-made system, but we've created this huge wetland environment when it does have water. So even now, next time it fills, will just be an absolute boom for golden perch, especially. So basically what's happened is, instead of having this whole productive river system, we're now back to very isolated. There's been a study done that 80% of the goldens in the lower Murray and in the Darling have all originate from Menindee Lakes. But yeah, so from a Victorian point of view, we're already 100% reliant on stocked fish. And as someone who loves wild fish, and that's why those few fish that turned up in the Goulburn was such a big deal. So no one had recorded golden spawning in Victoria. So quite interesting.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Cam. So did you want to move on to the fly tying, or?
Yeah, if there's no other questions.
Yep. That's fantastic.
Wouldn't surprise me if you get some questions during the fly tying, Cam. People We'll get a bit of courage during it, I guess.
Yeah, do it. Hopefully there's been a few beers drunk, so there's a bit even more courage coming through.
Oh, God, I'm about to make a tea, mate. I've got to admit, I'm a bit soft in that regard.
And if you want to, write it on the chat. Can I see the chat here?
You got to hover at the top, man. I think if you hover your mouse around, you'll see a chat down the bottom of the screen. If you're in full screen, just a little bar pop up down the bottom.
Yeah, down here.
It should pop up a new window.
Oh yeah, chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Righto. Cool, Gavin. Just got your message then. Good work. Yeah, there's plenty of caught up around Canberra. And yeah, anyway, Gavin just brought it up then. I've just read it. It's from the start of the talk. We say it all the time, basically because April Vokey managed to get, I'll be honest, information out of us. We didn't think we were going to give up on such a high rating podcast, but we had a huge chat with her, predominantly about Murray cod, but it feeds into a lot of the stuff I've touched on tonight as well. Just a little bit enlightening maybe on how some of our fisheries are managed. Righto, cool. So let's get into this fly time. Now, so the first one is that shrimp pattern I showed. Now, this is on a size 1 Arex, what is it? TP650S. I'm pretty sure is the one. I'm happy for Peter Klein to set me straight, but I'm pretty sure I got the model number right. Now, what's cool about this hook is that, see that bent shank in under the, like I haven't done the typical tie your thread on the hook. Basically, I just presume everyone has seen someone do that. So basically, we're putting our eyes right on the point where that bend is in, that pre-done bend for us is on that hook. The reason is when this hook's flipped like it would be, because we're waiting, if people are familiar with the clouser minnow, same principle. Any bonefish, flat style fly, the side that we put those eyes on is going to be the side that the hook gets flipped to. So for us in this situation, we're designing a fly that can ride along the bottom for us in a lot of situations, and it's going to avoid a lot of just snags and things. So at least in an impoundment situation, like by all means, you could put another weed guard on this, which I'd recommend in certain river situations. By and large, in impoundments, I'm not one for weed guards, even if there is that small chance that they might minimise me hooking a fish. By and large, even if I'm fishing close to structure, the stuff in the water is a lot, at least at the moment, a lot of it is flooded grass and smaller branches and things, so you can pull through it. So does it catch us any more fish or not? On step 2, we are putting in just 2 strands of black crystal flash. I don't know. Am I doing it just so the fly looks really cool, or are the fish going to say that's an antenna on a shrimp pattern? I better eat that shrimp. Either way, I'll put it in there. Maybe it's to sell flies too. Who knows? Righto. So now, as I touched on before, I'm all for natural materials in a fly. So I'm starting off with the first lot of natural materials. Now, if there's 2 materials I can never live without, thank you. If there's 2 materials I can never live without at my time bench, and this isn't just cod stuff, this is trout as well. They are, not that you're going to see marabou in either of these flies. One's marabou, love the stuff, purely because of what it does in the water. The other one is rabbit fur. So this is just cut off a bit of zonka strip, that pinch of olive there. Now, once upon a time, I used to tie shrimp flies. I used to tie shrimp and yabby patterns. Actually, I still get stuck every now and again, and I have to do it. And we burn mono to form the eye. Then I can start to get creative with I didn't come up with this idea, but could use like our UV resin, especially coloured ones, and form the eyes. And you have to be pretty good at your resin application to get real even looking eyes. Now there's this amazing product. You can buy preformed eyes, but there's one in particular called Easy Shrimp Eyes. I got my last lot off Brett and Cherie at BWC Flyers, but I know a lot of other stores are carrying them now. But those Easy Shrimp Eyes are incredible. You may pay a little bit more for them, but from a consistency point of view and your eyes being right where you want them every time, they're super cool. So yeah, no macrobacterium shrimp's got red eyes, but yeah, it looks cool. Hopefully the fish think the same thing. So at that point there, we're adding our legs, just silly legs, or I'm a tight ass. I actually use spinnerbait skirts off eBay. But yeah, we're just putting in two legs either side there, represent those quite prominent claws on a macrobacterium shrimp. I think that I use legs in a lot of my flies. Honestly, that is one trigger point that I'm convinced catches fish, not just on shrimp patterns. I'll even incorporate it into bigger streamers and things. And actually, the other streamer we're going to talk about, the belly buster, there's a photo back in the presentation. I actually tie up a version with legs as well. So you'll see too now that I've inverted that hook, and we're now working in the, like I inverted it there a while back. We're now working in the plane just like that shrimp's going to present to the fish. Next stage I've tied in, that's just a dyed olive cock saddle feather. I like to get it back to the point where you got these nice webby feathers. It's basically the base of that stalk looks like almost like marabou. Then we get into a point where we got those nice webby ones. It's going to make sense as I wind that hackle forward. And at that point there, I'm actually tying in rib, just like you would on a nymph or on a woolly bugger, that red stuff, which will make sense why that's there. So that hackle now gets wound all the way forward. I'm using hackle in this situation for two reasons. The one is suggestive of legs, like the little breather, feeler legs under a shrimp's tail. The other one is it serves a purpose on the fly. I incorporate this into a lot of my carp patterns as well. That slightly stiffer hackle is going to keep that fly from completely burying into the bottom. So we've got two things on this fly. We've got that, we can exaggerate it with the bend in that hook, combined with where we're adding our weight, plus that hackle is going to fend off a few little stray bits of grass or whatever. So we've basically got a fly. Well, here's the same fly. Where am I? He basically sits up more like that, and if he does tilt down like that, that hackle provides us a little bit of protection there. Plus a little bit more movement as well if we're fishing a fly quite slowly. Next, now you can use EP fibers, so a synthetic now. You can use EP fibers. This is actually H2O sculpting flash fiber. Basically, you're just going to put a pinch of that. It's a reasonable chunk there, but you're going to shape it so you have it go down either side of the hook, which will make sense here in a sec, because the next stage, and basically tied it in and trimmed it, and that's suggestive of the shrimp's tail as well. Now, at this point here, we're coming forward with our wire ribbing and tying off just in behind, and sorry, wire ribbing's coming forward over the top of the sculpting flash fibers. So we're suggesting a bit more feeler action and stuff going on up the front of the fly. Plus we're tying in and securing in our what becomes our shell back. We get that segmented look of the shrimp. So at that point there, you're going to whip finish off just in behind the eyes. And then we're going to use UV. UV is, I don't know what other tyers think, but I think it's probably the biggest advancement we've had in recent times for fly tying. UV cure glues. I know I muck around with it more, like just use it more in situations where you could have used epoxy in the past just because it goes off so well. So yeah, great stuff. And yeah, then we've really made that shrimp sort of come to life, I guess. Is there any questions on that fly? No. Going once.
Oh, I've got one. Sorry, mate. I think I missed what you said about the dumbbells. Are those lead or brass? Or does it not matter?
Oh, I think they're brass.
Beauty. But yeah, you said before you're purposely making this like as heavy as possible. Like really, you really want this to drag the bottom.
Yeah. So you can fish it. Realistically, I tie this fly, slays it on carp as well, in like bead chain versions and things like that in a lot shallower water. You can vary that weight as much as you want, as long as you're fishing it so you get that, you're using your weight to keel that hook properly. This is about personally as heavy as I'll go, probably because I just really enjoy fishing 6 weights when I'm chasing yellows. But you could definitely go heavier. I think they're about 4.2 gram wires. I think going bigger too, just aesthetics doesn't quite look as good. I don't know. And heavier than this, again, you're probably better off using it on a spinning rod.
What's the retrieval like though, Cam? Like, is it a really slow pause, then sort of tweak, pause type thing? What do we?
Just those little hops, just to literally get him to come up and go down again. So you just
how often though? Are you letting it sit there for a while and then doing it again, or?
Could be doing anything and everything on the given day.
Right,
a lot of the time, it's just a little skip down.
Okay.
What size hooks are we looking at?
That's a size 1, so that's the smallest hook I can get in that pattern from Arex, and to get that pre-made bend in the hook, you could most definitely fish it smaller than that. Like all the ways, you could fish at any sizes basically. 1's just a good, if anyone's ever seen those macrobacterium shrimp, they can be quite big critters. That's why they do get called prawns in other countries. So 1's not a bad size. But by all means, this fly would work really well on brim as well over the coast. And you could definitely muck around in different sizes with it.
Okay.
So when the YellowBelly grabs that fly, does he engulf it, or does he all the way down, or is it like a subtle strike?
It's sometimes a tick or a quiet, almost like a thump. I can't believe I didn't bring this up in the main talk, because it's like the biggest thing ever. It's all got to be a strip strike. You want to be practicing that strip strike. What we're doing is more saltwater fishing in a lot of ways than trout fishing. So that being said, a lot of the time you're already stripping a fly like this in, and you'll just strip into a fish and they're there. That initial turn of speed of a yellow is quite quick. They can take you by surprise, and probably more than any fish too, especially in a little bit deeper water. I tend to find that you end up fishing, they'll bend a rod out really well, and you pretty much end up, it's often a lot of times a real vertical fight too. So, but yeah, it's normally sometimes very subtle, just little, almost like a pluck, and then you're on the fish. There's actually, you can see, I mucked around with this one last year. I haven't used it this year, but where is it? What am I doing? You see it? See that assist hook there? So that's actually like a yabby pattern with another little stinger hook tied in there as an assist hook, just to try and pick up that fish that might just like pluck at it, and not like just hopefully like that. I don't know. Might convert 1 or 2 more. Anybody else? Righto, we'll go to the next one. So the belly buster. Now, yeah, like I said in the main talk, I got the ideas for this one after going and fishing Avalon flies on the flats off Venezuela for permit and triggerfish and seeing how this keel worked. Really positioned to fly really nicely. So that was on a fly that was actually tied with dumbbell eyes and the keel as well. Immediately, they didn't use tungsten beads on the keel, they used brass. But the other thought I always have with this fly is that it wouldn't be a straight out rattle as far as noise on the fly, but you get that subtle little click, click. And you can almost, you just believe me, you can just, it's almost like a little, this is the point where I'll be down at Calder and I'd pass the fly around and everyone could like shake it and just listen to it work. But so we're just starting off just with Tywell, what is it, Pete? Crystal Flash? Polar Flash.
Looks like Sparkle Flash.
Sparkle Flash, that's the one it is. So there's too many flashes in the market these days. That is it. It is Sparkle Flash. Now, tie that in. Then at that point there, you're going to tie in a length of, and make sure it is coming off directly in the middle of your hook. Like, so it's directly in line with coming off the top of your hook. You're going to tie in your keeling piece. I prefer to use fluoro, just like I do on my leaders. I didn't really go into that too much tonight, but it's more abrasion resistant. And it's just a little bit better for what we're going to do, if that makes sense. So, because we're going to be running beads and stuff on it, it's going to last longer. So, yeah, just a little bit of 15-pound fluoro, the same stuff you're going to use on your tippet. Fluoro is a little bit better than mono in this too, because it's a little bit stiffer, does a little bit better job. Now, this stuff here is called Polar Flash. It comes in a couple of different sizes. That's the 1-inch stuff. Now, I'm gluing that fluoro into, and if you wanted, you could double it over and make it a little bit stronger again. So then we're just, advancing that Polar Flash forward. Lake trout fishermen should be getting a little bit excited right now and thinking, how good would that stuff look with a marabou tail out the back of it as a woolly bugger pattern? There's a hot tip for you, and that worked really well last time I fished Wendouree too, that same copper colour. Now at this point here, we can vary it up. These are 4 3mm tungsten beads. By all means, you can use dumbbell eyes at the front and run brass beads. I just bite the bullet, thread the tungsten beads on. Now, you zoom, try to take it in there so you look at it. Basically, you're going to thread them on opposite to what you would if you were putting it on your hook. So the more open end goes over the line first. That'll make sense when I bend it over. So it's basically the other end gets fed on, not the skinny hole end. Skinny hole end. There's a technical term. So now we're bringing that fluorocarbon forward, and you should be able to see now how we've formed that keel under the fly. Does that make sense? Now we're leaving a bit of gap here at the front. Just keep it, so not about a quarter of the shank length. So and just gluing that in there now. Now at that point there, you're actually going to roughly, so you don't waste too much of your Zonka strip. That's a Magnum Zonka. What is it? 3/8, I think. So 3/8 of an inch Zonka strip. Not the little one, the next 1 or 2 up. You're going to use your hook. So now if anyone's tied a true Zonka, you'll see how I'm doing this a little bit differently, because I'm not using a true Zonka pattern. You're basically going to secure, the hook would have been around the other way, and you would have brought wire ribbing forward like you would in a woolly bugger or something, and secured your Zonka strip down on the top of the hook like that. Here we want it, and I could use wire ribbing, but I don't, because I want to keep that Polar Flash body as buggy and as lifelike as I possibly can. So all I'm doing in this picture on the right, I'm locating the center of the hide of the rabbit strip, and I'm piercing it through there, but allowing myself enough room. And once I've pierced it, then I can reposition it on and off the vise, just so I can get my Zonka strip in between there. Does that make sense? Because this is probably the most hardest bit of the whole fly.
Yeah.
So from there, that's basically just hanging out pierced on the hook. Now, this Yoo-hoo stuff, I come across this a few years ago. It's been around forever. You just get it at Office Works or any office supplies. It is unreal. It's just a really good glue once it cures. I use it to secure eyes and stuff as well. Really good stuff. So, yeah, all I've done with that is just a few little dabs in on the hide portion of that. I don't want to smother it because it's just going to go all over my fly. And then I just whip that Zonka strip in. That glue goes off good enough fairly quickly, and then that wing's secure. I've actually found that the rest of your fly gets trashed before that Zonka comes off the body. And if it did come off, just put a couple more bits of glue on. So yeah, admittedly, I could come forward with wire, do all that stuff. I actually find that by doing this, I maintain a lot more of my bulk in the rabbit strip, and I'm not picking out stray fibers and things that anyone who's mucked around with this knows happens. Now, probably my third favorite material is fin raccoon or Arctic fox, and I've made a collar of it there. Now, this orange-black color is with the copper. I find a really good color in a little bit turbid water, which is like lakes like Epilock, Cancurran, Eildon up the Delatite. This is I really like this color in that sort of color water. Now, I'm just making a collar. I do collars a little bit differently, I think, to a lot of people. I basically measure it out. It's going to be the same length as my hook shank. I'm not doing a collar all the way around. I just basically tie it in 3 bits. I do a pinch of fur here, a pinch of fur on top, and then a pinch of fur on the other side, just making sure my lengths stay the same. So already you've got a fly that it's constructed out of 2 of the most lifelike breathable materials on the face of the planet. And they're just complementing each other. If one breathes like that, the other one might breathe like that. So I personally, I get a little bit excited about flies that have a life of their own under the water, plus whatever I can do to it. Now, I just said that and then looked at Katie and she just looked at me like, you're an idiot. But anyway, so now we're going to finish off the head portion of the fly. I use a lot of brushes. I probably should make my own brushes, but I'm just not organised enough. But this is just a 1-inch H2O, just in black brush. Got about this. You'll get 3 turns in there, leaving that bit there. Now, the reason I like these smaller brushes for this work is we're not trimming off heaps of excess, and then we can just come in and trim this head shape. This head shape, it's a little bit different to a lot of my cod flies and things. I've actually shaped it a little bit more on the bottom, but honestly, you don't have to be anal about it. You can just muck around with a head shape like that. The reason you want that little bulbous head is he just gives you a nice little side to side action on the strip. So from there, then we're just purely adding eyes, like, yeah, a little bit of that Yoo-hoo glue, just a tiny smidgen. Position your eyes. You'll find it goes off quite quickly. It's easy to handle though. You just, it's good stuff. And then just a nice dab of never too much. You don't want to put too much to really affect the performance of your fly. I just like a flexible UV resin, whatever your favorite is, just on the eye there. Flex really keeps flies on well, eyes on well on flies. And then just a little bit on the top here, just to form that head a bit so we get a nice action. And yeah, and that's it. Same photo you saw before. That's the same fly and a fish there from last week, but just I added legs to it on that one. I don't think the legs caught the fish, but it looked good. And that's it. Yeah. Any questions? That's it's a B10S, so it's a stinger style hook that one's in a size 2. So it's actually not that big of a hook. And it's for a fly to chase natives, it's not overly big. Like I'm going to let the cat out of the bag too. This fly is very good on bigger than average brown trout in rivers. And that keel works really well when you're throwing it into rocks and things. Probably in more natural colours personally, like that fish was caught on. I like it for trout, but it works very well. Thank you.
So you pierced rabbit zonker through the hook, yeah? Is that correct? So does that weaken it? Does the fish, do you find it breaks or tears or?
No, you're jamming a very fine gauge hook through it. No, don't. By the time you then glue it in, no, I think you're going to do a lot of fishing before you break that. I'd actually say that your orange collar will fall to bits before the zonker will. Yeah, if you think that you're somewhere where you might reliably encounter a cod and you want to give yourself an each way bet, I'd go a little bit stouter hook. In the smaller sizes, a Gamakatsu Siwash isn't a bad hook for that. Keep in mind that it's quite a heavy hook, and you probably, it sounds crazy, but you actually need to often add more weight to those heavier hooks to get them to balance properly. But yeah, it's like the shrimp pattern, that's tungsten beads. If I was doing more shallower edges or lakes with it, I'd happily use brass beads on it as well. But yeah, I've tied that to mostly fish out of the boat, so deeper edges.
How do you go casting that? Because obviously, I mean, I've got, a similar fly that I've tied and it's got 3 tungsten beads, and that's so heavy, it's not funny.
What size hook?
About size 1.
What size beads?
Ooh, 3 mil.
I find there's a massive difference between a 3.5 mil bead and a 3 mil in weight. I think 3 mil's not too bad, but that's actually 3.5 mil on that fly and that fish.
Yeah.
And that was yeah, I knew it was there on a 6 weight. But yeah, I think, and it's that trade-off too, Ben. Like, if you've already got a sinking line in that situation, do you necessarily need the tungsten beads? So it's something that you can definitely play with. But personally, I think they're all right. But yeah.
So do you cast that like with?
What kind of line are you using for that then, Cam?
SA Titan tapers, an old, what did I use the other day? I actually had a saltwater, that wasn't an SA, that was actually an older Vision prototype line I had in my bag of tricks. There was I was the other day, I was fished a 7-weight line on a 6-weight rod in quite an aggressive style line, so it was probably heavier line again.
Yeah.
But I tend to like those punchy sort of taper lines. Like, I don't know, this year I'm going to try out airflow lines a bit more, just with the way things have panned out this season. But you can't go wrong with SA Titan tapers. I think they're incredible lines, and they're really good range of sink weights. Maybe if you're using your trout gear, you might want to overline a little bit more, but it's all a personal preference too.
And are you doing like a oval cast, like a Belgian style cast?
I tend not to, no.
Okay. You're not getting bounced though from that heavy weight at the end?
If you're feeling that too much, I think you're hanging on to too much line in the air, and your brain should be like, okay, I've already put all this line on this rod, I've intentionally overlined this rod potentially, or even if I'm using one of those aggressive, essentially integrated shooting types of line, if you're finding that you're really feeling that tug or that clunk, I find it's because you're trying to hold on to too much line in the air, and you should have let go of it a lot earlier, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
just like shoot.
Yeah, just point and shoot. That's the biggest thing, and I say it all the time. It's probably my biggest peeve in guiding is the 3 and 4 false cast mentality. I'm not saying you're doing it now, but I find that I'll be honest, male brains in particular, we hang on to it. It's like, oh, I just got to get it that little bit further. I'm going to give it that 3rd or 4th false cast. Now, there's a few things at fault there. You do that over the course of the day. How many potential casts have you cost yourself when you could have got it done on 1 or 2 false casts? Or the other one is you're just tiring yourself out. And I'm always about efficiency. That's if you want to practice, go and practice that. That's in any fishing situation. You just get so many more opportunities. Yeah, it's incredible. In sight fishing as well, you haven't got time to hang on for that many false casts as well. I love false casting. Oh, sorry, I love fly casting, but I just think sometimes we do it too much.
Yeah.
In terms of overall length, that's a pretty short fly. So you're looking at like 60, 70 mil kind of length, is it?
Yeah. And then go and have a look how long most flat-headed gudgeons are.
Yeah.
Or shrimp, or most people's favourite hard body lures for goldens tend to be 60, 80 mil long maybe at the moment.
Yeah. So that's your typical size for yellow belly flies.
Yeah. But very similar. Like I think it was Shannon Kitchener's. Like Brett ties up heaps of those Donny Brascos each year, and like realistically, they're very similar fly. But I think Brett's last time I was talking to him, he's cranking them out on a size 1. They might be a tad longer than these, but everything comes into that same sort of size range for sure. Because you've stayed on for this long, that fly on a 4.0 hook is pretty good on cod as well. But sometimes in that situation, and feeds into what you said, Ben, I'll still fish that keel just for that little bit of extra noise without going a full-blown rattle, but you might want to weight it with lead dumbbell eyes instead of obviously loading up with a heap of big tungsten beads to get that hook to keel properly, just purely off the bead.
You tried bend back hooks at all for that? No.
Those beads, what are they?
Yeah, I tie a lot of bend backs.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah.
Yeah, with that stuff.
PR 320 is the best bend back hook you'll use. Interestingly, my tying den's out in a converted shed outside. I had a really bad run this year before the heater kicked in, of bending 4.0 PR3R20s on cold nights, and I was just breaking them. Ping, and the only thing I could put it down to was the hooks were too cold.
Okay.
Yeah, because I heated the same batch of hooks up and they were fine the next day. So.
Where is it?
Cool.
Those beads, when you put them on that piece of nylon, do you glue? Do you tie them off too?
Yeah, like glued either end when it's secured onto the shank. But if you look there, they're free running on the line.
Oh, they're free running.
Yeah. So the reason for that is just that little bit of. I think it just adds a little bit, that little tick tick noise.
Oh.
It's interesting. Like yellows in particular, like they were. For anyone that's fished conventional gear, there's a very famous lure that Jack would do, the TN series. 10 years ago, it felt like all you had to do was tie one of them on and throw it in a lake that had yellowbelly in it, and you're guaranteed to catch a fish. Now they rattle to the point where you can hear it come up through the water in the floor of an aluminium boat. Like you could hear the acoustics would be bouncing off your boat. About 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and to this day, and they were really good on cod as well. Now fish hardly want to eat them. And the crazy thing is, it's not just fish that were alive then. It's new fish in the system. Don't want to eat them like they used to. So it's that whole learnt behaviour thing, I think, going on in fish. So they definitely respond to a little bit of noise. They don't respond to the heavy metal feeds that we still have in those TN series. They still catch the odd fish, but just not what they used to. It's always really intrigued me. Like, I know things fall in and out of fashion in fishing, but this isn't a fashion thing. This is dead set. Fish just do not eat them like they used to. That being said, in this fly, I'm still an advocate for that keel, that little bit of noise, and mostly because I don't think there'll ever be enough fly anglers on the water that we're going to influence the golden perch population not to eat these flies.
Really, even a shrimp, when it kicks back, or even a yabby when it kicks back, creates a bit of that commotion, doesn't it?
Yeah, and those little puffs of sediment and things, and I think, yeah, like I add rattles to some flies. More often than not, I'm adding rattles to cod flies if I specifically get asked to do it. By and large, I don't stress about it in my own flies. But I think in this situation, I think a little bit of noise can play a part for sure. And it's dual purpose as well. It keels it. It keels us. Keels the fly, and it's a different presentation again. Like typically weighted flies, we're still going to get that jig to retrieve, whereas this guy sinks more and fishes a lot straighter, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Which is why I think it works well on trout as well, because trout are suckers for something that swims dead straight through the water, especially if it's got Rapala written on it.
Pretty smart, they can read.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I think probably run out of questions now, but Cam, I think this is a brilliant talk. It's, yeah, I guess it's something that I've caught mainly as a byproduct to fishing for cod. You know, and the flies they've taken have been, 5-0 hooks.
Yeah.
No issues, so when they're hungry, they'll definitely take a big fly.
What time were you seeing them in autumn or early summer?
Yeah, early summer and through summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, dusk and dawn.
Broken?
No, Loddon.
Yeah, okay. Interesting.
Loddon, yeah, they're big yellows though. No,
yeah.
No small fish, and yeah, definitely. So 5-0 without a tail and 5-0 with a tail.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're not shy from what I'm concerned, and like I said, quite often I think I've got a cod on at first hit, and then when they turn, they really pull a bend in your rod.
No, they got a really good turn of speed, that's for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. That's a little bit different to what we see over here. We tend to, you get the odd, like somewhere like Lake Mulwala where they still gets huge numbers of goldens put in. Admittedly, they can easily swim in and out of Mulwala, but there's a big population there. I'd say 20-1 is the ratio of cod to goldens, except if you go out there and fish specifically for yellows in spring. But I think it's twofold as well, that we tend not to fish that small for cod. So when we're definitely favourite not catching them, if that makes sense, in that situation, because there's just so many shrimp in Mulwala, like it. Yeah, but I think if you specifically went out and fished for Goldens in Mulwala through the year, you'd have a lot higher catch rate.
It's funny you say that. You know, on opening day for cod, I've had old timers come up and said, "Oh, there's no shrimp in the water," and it's like the water's dead.
Yeah.
The shrimp traps out. If they don't catch them, it's like the water's dead.
Yeah, but the water's probably only 16, 17 degrees.
Yeah, when it hasn't had a chance to really warm up.
Have you stuck your legs in Mulwala once the water temperature increases before?
No, I've only fished a couple of times.
Yeah. So they pay big money for it in Japan to get those little fish to take the skin off your feet. It's a weird sensation loading a boat back on the trailer and you're walking a Mulwala and then you shine and they come from everywhere. It's pretty crazy.
Fair enough. Right. Anyway, Cam, we've run out of questions. I reckon there's quite a few people say thank you very much on the chat line. So we really appreciate it, mate. That's brilliant talk. Again, brilliant talk. And hopefully, the people who visited tonight can turn around and give you a buzz and organise a trip, because that's what it's all about as well. You share your knowledge, but to be able to get on the water and do this would be even better.
Yeah, we're patiently waiting to see what November 8 brings. Don't worry about that. We're
not the only one.
Yeah, I've in the bubble at the moment, so I can actually sneak up around Cairn Coburn as long as I've got New South Wales people that stay on the New South Wales side of the river. But yeah, it's been interesting. Interesting. But yeah, looking forward to everyone getting out and about again, and yeah.
Right, a couple of other guys down here. I'll thank Chris as well for organising it.
Yeah, I'll thank Chris as well. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, Katie in the background, obviously.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie.
Here she is.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And Stephen for organising the Zoom link. So thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And
thanks a lot.
See you on the water.